Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Today's video is somewhat bittersweet as this is the last planned video that I have in this series. Now I say last planned video because the 10th and final video of this series is going to be viewer choice. So that's right, you guys are going to decide what you want me to do for the 10th video. Could be mobs, could be cave generation. So please leave all of your suggestions in the comments below, and the one with the most likes is going to be the one that I will do for the 10th video. So all I'll say is please take it easy on me. Don't suggest anything that'll be too crazy. I'll have to pare it back a little bit, but I'm really excited to see what you guys want me to work on for that last video. So now getting to today's video, we're going to be implementing 3 new features that will add a bit of polish and pizzazz to our game. So let's walk through those right now. So the first that you can see is this toolbar at the bottom here. So I can now see which blocks I have selected. Maybe I want to pick the pickaxe here. So this will be a little bit of HTML and CSS that we're going to work on. Pretty straightforward. The next is we're going to add a pickaxe model. So we finally get some extension of our player into the world, and when we remove a block here, we're going to do a little kind of chipping away animation with the pickaxe. So I'll be showing you how to load that 3D model and how we can go about animating it. And the final thing that we're going to be working on is save games. So I'm actually going to show you how this works. I'm going to build a little structure here. All right, so I finished building this little structure here and even added a little secret passageway underneath, so I can come in underneath and we can go up into the house and we can come out the front. I'm really proud of what I made. I want to keep it. I want to be able to come back to this and work on it later. So what I can do now is I can hit F1 and we'll see that the game is saved. So the little information icon pops up in the lower left there. Now if I reload the page, you can see this is where that house was previously, and it's gone now. But I can reload that save data by hitting F2. My guy got a little stuck there. And there it is. Our house is back. So what we're doing is we're capturing all of the data for our world. So all of the world generation parameters. We're capturing all the data in the data store, and we're storing it in local storage in the browser. And then when we want to pull that data back up, all we need to do is deserialize it and reload that world. So I'm going to show you how to do that. It's pretty straightforward. So yeah, those are the 3 things that we're going to work on in this video. And as another quick reminder, please make sure that you leave your suggestion for the next video in the comments below. Okay, so starting off with the pickaxe, we're going to need a model for the pickaxe. And I went on Sketchfab and I found this cool pickaxe model that was made by Cove 989 here. So I will provide a link in the description to this, but you can download the 3D model here. And here's all the different formats. We'll be using the GLB format. So it's sort of a binary representation of the model. That's kind of the most common file type that's used now. So I'm going to go ahead and download that file and then we'll add it in our project. All right, so I've added our GLB file for our pickaxe under models. Now we need to write some code to load that model. So let's create a new file for that under scripts. So new file, let's call this modelloader.js. And this class will be responsible for loading our pickaxe model and then any other models that we would then load in the future. So far we've just been using built-in Three.js geometry, but now we need to import external files. So in order to load those models, we'll need to import the gltf loader, which is used to import gltf files. So let's add that dependency in at the top here. And then we'll create a loader on our model loader. This will be a new gltf loader. I'm going to create a dictionary here that will store all of our models. So this will be an object. So far we only have a pickaxe, and we'll just initialize this to undefined. Then let's add a function in our class called load models. Now since all of the loading happens asynchronously, we need to let our main file know when our model is done being loaded. So we're going to pass in a reference to an onload function. So basically when the loading is finished, then we'll call onload, and that will trigger some other action. So to load our model, we'll do this .loader.load, and then we'll pass in the path of the file that we're going to load. So it'll be public models pickaxe.glb. And then there's a callback function that gets called when the model is finished loading. So that'll be our model is passed in there. So we'll grab the mesh from that model. So there's a scene property when we import a GLTF for GLB model. So by grabbing that scene, we're basically grabbing the mesh that we're importing. Then we want to update our model dictionary. So this .models.pickaxe equals to mesh. And then finally, we'll call onload and we'll pass in our models. So we need to import this model loader in our main file. And then when we're finished loading our pickaxe model, then we're going to add that model to our player. Right, in our main file, I'm going to do our model import right after we set up the scene. So let's create our model loader here, equal to new model loader. We'll import that. And then we'll call model loader.load models. Then we have our callback here, which returns the models. Then we need to add the pickaxe to the player in here. So obviously, we need to go and write this code before we can call it. So let's go into our player and add some code where we can set the tool for the player. So to keep things a bit more simple and contained, I'm going to create a separate class for our tool. Let's add a new file called tool.js. So we'll do export class tool. And this is actually going to be, this is going to be a Three.js group. So this tool group is going to contain the tool mesh. I need to import the Three.js library here. Now we're going to need a few properties on our tool. One will be called animate. So this will be whether or not the tool is currently animating. Then we'll need animation start. Set that to 0 to begin with. This is the start time for the animation. We'll also need animation speed. So I've already figured out these values before. This will be 0.025. That's basically how fast is the pickaxe moving. Speed of the tool animation in radians per second. And then we also want to keep track of the animation itself. We'll set this to, say, undefined. And this will be the currently active animation. Finally, we'll need the tool mesh. So this will also be undefined at first. And this will be the 3D mesh of the actual tool. So we're going to add a reference to the tool class to our player. So let's see, on our player here, let's throw it after these other properties. Tool is going to equal to new tool. After we've defined our tool, we need to parent it to something. Our player is basically represented by the camera here, so we're going to parent the tool to the camera. That way, wherever the player is moving around, as the camera's rotating, the tool is going to move with that camera. So we'll do this .camera add tool. So the tool is parented to the camera, and the camera is parented to the scene. So our tool should now be within our scene. Let's define a function on our tool now where we can set this tool mesh. So we'll just call this set. Let's call it set mesh. So we'll pass in our mesh variable here. So to begin with, we want to clear the existing tool. So we'll do this .clear, then this .add our mesh, then mesh receive shadow equals true, mesh cast shadow equals true. We want our pickaxe to be able to cast shadows onto the ground, so make sure that's set. Now we need to make sure that we position the pickaxe relative to the player. We kind of want it out to the front and the right of the player, and then we'll need to make sure that pickaxe is rotated correctly. So I've already gone through the painstaking work of figuring out exactly how to position and scale and rotate the pickaxe so everything looks all hunky-dory. So I'm not going to go through that. It's really just a process of trial and error. But we just shifted a bit in the X, Y, and Z axes. I'm scaling it down by half because the model's kind of big. And then I'm doing some rotation so it kind of looks like, you know, the player's holding it out front and it's tilted a little bit. So those values are just tweaked to make it look nice, and that's all we really need there. We want to go back to our main file, and when we're loading the models, we want to set the mesh on our tool. So after our models are loaded, we'll do player tool set mesh. We'll set it to models.pickaxe, which now contains a reference to that GLB model we imported of our pickaxe. So one issue I noticed right away here is we're referencing the player before it's defined. So that's an easy fix. We just need to move this down here. One other change that we'll need to make, if you're using Vite, the file paths work a little bit differently. So I was testing this out before and it was breaking things. So just wanted to point out that the file path here should not contain public in it. All you need to do is do / and then whichever folder it is in your public directory. So it'd be models in this case. So no public needed if you're using Vite. All right, off to the browser. And it looks like getting tool is not defined. Player line 39. Probably forgot this keyword. Let's see, line 39. Yep, right here. So this should load now. There we go. So you can see our player kind of floating up in the world here. So let me go into first person mode, and there we have our pickaxe. It's positioned just perfectly. So now we need to add an animation to that pickaxe, make it a bit more interesting. So let's figure out how to animate this model. So on our tool, let's add an update method, which we'll use to update the animation state each frame. So if animate, then animate the tool. All right, so removing this comment here, first we need to check, is there a tool mesh? If there's not one, then nothing to animate. So let's create a property up here called animation time. So this is going to return basically the amount of time that has elapsed since the animation started. So this will be performance.now minus animation start. So inside of here, all we're going to be doing is rotating our tool back and forth. We'll be using a sine function for that. So let's do this tool mesh rotation.y is equal to the sine of our animation time multiplied by our animation speed. Now we need to control how much it's rotating. So sine goes between -1 and 1. So there's some, factor we need there to control the amplitude of that. So let's add something up here. Call it amplitude of the tool animation. So this will be animation amplitude. Set that to 0.5. I know from testing this before, that's a good number, gives a good realistic motion. So we'll multiply this dot animation amplitude by our sine function. So our sine function will now go between 0.5 and -0.5. Now we don't want our tool to animate indefinitely. We need to stop it at some point. So we'll use a timeout for that. So when we create a timeout, we actually get a reference to that timeout. We're going to be storing that in our animation property here. So this dot animation is going to equal to set timeout. So inside of set timeout, we're going to set this dot animate equals to false. Now we need to control basically how long is the tool going to animate before we stop the animation. So let's add one more property here. Let's see, duration of the animation. Animation duration. That will be, let's say 1 second. So we'll plop that down here, this dot animation duration. Now, if there's an existing animation going on and we trigger another animation, we want to clear out the old animation. So we can do that easily with clear timeout. So do this dot animate. So I apologize, I was not looking at my notes very clearly. I'm blending two functions together here. So let's clear up the confusion. This code needs to come out of here. So I'm just going to cut that out. We need to create a new function called start animation. That code will go in there. So let's talk about update first, and then we'll go back and make sense of this. So in update, if animate is set to true and a tool mesh is set, then we're just going to update the Y rotation of our tool mesh. So as long as we're animating, that's just going to keep doing that. All right, back to start animation. So this will trigger a new animation of the tool. So a few things are missing up here. When we start the animation, we'll set this dot animate equals to true. Then this dot animation start is equal to the current time. So once that is set to true, then we're good to go here. So the animation set to true, we can animate. We set the animation start. So the tool is always kind of moving from the same position. Since we're using a sine function, if you pass a 0 in for sine, you're going to get a 0 out. So the tool is always going to start from the neutral position and then go back and forth. And then we're clearing the existing animation before we set up a timer that will stop the current animation. So once the duration has elapsed, then we will stop animating. Right, now all we need to do is to trigger this function here when we click the mouse down and we have the tool active. So when we're in block removal mode, that means that the pickaxe is going to be visible and we want to animate it. So all we need to do here is player, tool, start animation. So let's go to the browser now and see if our animation code is working like we want it to. So it looks like we're getting an error here. Tool.js animate is not defined. Let's go back into tool. Let's see here. This, well, what line was that? Line 43. Yep, sure enough here. This should be this dot animate. I always forget the this keyword. This dot animate and this dot tool mesh. Let's make sure I didn't forget anything anywhere else. I think we're good to go. Let's go try it one more time. All right, moment of truth here. Let's go into block removal mode, and we are not getting our animation here. So let's put in some console logs. Let's figure out what's going on. All right, so first thing, I'm going to put a log in start animation. So we'll do console log starting tool animation. So I'm going to add a log down in our update method. This will spew a lot of logs, but that's okay. So we'll log if we're currently animating. So I'm expecting this is not going to get hit because our tool mesh isn't rotating. But at least we'll see if we're trying to start the animation. Right, so back into this mode here. And it looks like it's starting the animation, but we're not actually getting that animation triggered. So, I think I know what I did here. I made a oopsie. Animation duration. That is in milliseconds. So that's running for 1 millisecond before it stops. Let's set that to 1,000 milliseconds instead. And still not getting any animation. All right, so that's not our issue. So let's see, this dot animation equals set timeout. So that looks good to me. Let's add another log here. Make sure this isn't getting triggered too early. Stopping animation. Right, so you can see that stopping animation does happen about 1 second after starting the animation. So this all appears to be working, but for some reason our tool update method is not getting called. So let's go in our player where that should be getting called. So that's right here. I think what might be happening, let's go set a breakpoint in our code here instead of using debug console logs. So let's go find our tool file. Let me pull this out a bit. Throw it down here. All right, right in our tool update method, we'll add a breakpoint there. Looks like it's already getting hit. And you can see that tool mesh is undefined. So animate is false, like we would expect, but tool mesh is undefined. So for some reason, this is not getting set, and that's because I'm never setting tool mesh. So that would definitely explain it. All right, so down in set mesh here, we will clear the existing tool mesh, and then this dot tool mesh is equal to mesh. And just for clarity, this dot mesh. All right, let's give it one more go. I think we should be good now. So I have the pickaxe mode enabled, and I'm getting a whole bunch of errors. Sign is not defined. Man, we're just swinging and missing today. So this should be math.sign. But you finally get to see me do some real-time debugging. This is what it is. This is what it's actually like when I'm making this game in my own time. I just hide all the embarrassing stuff from you guys. But I figured today, it's our last video. Let's show it. Let's show you how it all works. All right. This is it. We got this. There we go. Perfect. Now it looks like our animation is ending up kind of in a random spot. Sometimes it ends a little bit up, a little bit down. Let's tweak that a bit. So when the animation stops, this, let's see, tool mesh, rotation y equals 0. Let's make sure it resets to that default neutral position. You can get rid of these log statements now. And I'm going to put the console back on the right so my screen isn't so warped. All right. There we go. Back to neutral. I think the pickaxe time is a little bit exaggerated, so let's reduce the duration. Let's set it to, I don't know, 674 milliseconds. Why not? And then let's try it again. It's a bit of a herky-jerky motion. Let's tweak it a little bit more. Maybe you need to try 750. That looks pretty good, I think. Can always change it more later. That's good for now. So another weird thing is that when I'm interrupting the other animation, it looks pretty bad. So I think if there's an animation ongoing, I don't want to be able to trigger a new animation. So right up here, we'll do a check if animate is true, and we'll just return. So I like that a little bit better. We're not getting that kind of weirdness going on. I'm sure we could tweak this for hours, but it's working like we need it to. We have a tool now in our player's hand. The tool's animating when we are mining blocks. So that's exactly what we're shooting for. So I think we're done with this one. Now that we've added the pickaxe, let's go ahead and add a toolbar at the bottom of the screen so we can see what block is currently selected. Now I'm not going to walk through line by line adding this toolbar in, since it's pretty much just HTML and CSS, and this isn't really a CSS tutorial. I don't really want to get deep into the CSS concepts. So we'll just add that code in, and then I'll show you more about the JavaScript code needed to make that toolbar work to have the different blocks highlight. So in our index.html file, I went ahead and defined our toolbar here. You can see that there's a toolbar container. So this basically is an element that takes up the entire width on the bottom of the screen. Then there's the toolbar, which is centered within that container. Then, of course, all the toolbar icons. So we have 8 different icons for our different block types. And then we have one additional icon for our pickaxe. So here's our styles. I'll talk through them very quickly. So remember that we have our toolbar container, our toolbar, and then each of our images in our toolbar, each of the icons has a toolbar icon class associated with it. So those are basically the 3 identifiers that we have. So going into styles here, I'm setting the toolbar container to a fixed position on the bottom of the screen, and that's a flexbox. And then the toolbar itself, and we're setting the background color, the border, some padding, and this flexbox up here is really used to center the toolbar on the screen. So you can see this toolbar container is taking up the entire width of the screen. The toolbar itself is the visible portion that sits centered. So that's how that works. So the toolbar itself is another flexbox. We're setting a little gap between each of the icons. Then we're setting a width, a height, and an outline on each of the toolbar icons. Now we want to outline the currently selected toolbar icon in white. So we'll need to add some JavaScript to toggle the CSS class based on what block type or what tool is selected. So in the browser now, you can see that we have all of our different icons listed out on the bottom. We have our toolbar all set up. So now we need to update the selection of the currently selected block type or tool when I push one of the number keys. So we'll just have to update those CSS styles when that key is pressed. We control which icon is selected via this CSS class here. So that's currently on the pickaxe. In our player here, when we push one of the numeric keys, we need to remove the selected class from the currently selected toolbar icon. And then we need to set the selected class for whichever is going to become the new active icon. We can identify our toolbar icons via their IDs right here. So it's basically toolbar dash and then the ID of the block type. In the case of the pickaxe, that's going to be a 0. So let's go to our player here. We don't actually have the clouds on our toolbar, so we don't need digit 9. So we'll do document get element by ID. So this will be toolbar dash, then this active block ID. Then we're going to get the class list, and we're going to remove the selected class. Let's hide the sidebar here. And then after we update the active block ID, then we're going to add that selected class to whatever the new active block ID is. So let's go try that out. So I push 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like our pickaxe was still selected there, and I think that's because our starting active block ID is grass. So let's just set that to empty. Go back down to our on key down. Great, that fixed that problem. So we can see all these blocks are, these icons, are getting selected. And one last thing is we don't want to show the pickaxe when we're in block placement mode. We only want to show the pickaxe when the pickaxe is selected. So we only want that pickaxe to show when the active block ID is 0. So we can do, let's see, this tool visible is equal to this active block ID is equal to 0. only show the tool when it is currently active. So let's pick any of these keys now. And if I select the pickaxe again, it pops back up. So there we go. Our pickaxe hides away when we don't need it. All right, so we have our pickaxe, we have our toolbar. The last thing that we need is to be able to save and load games. And that's just going to take a few minutes, so let's go do that right now. So first thing, I need a little status indicator in the bottom left of the screen so I can know when the game has been loaded or saved. So let's add a new div called status. And I'll add a little CSS for that to make sure it's positioned within the bottom left. Let's go into our styles here. So all I've done is set it to a fixed position, a few pixels away from the bottom left, and then setting the font size and the font color here. So pretty straightforward there. Now we need to write some functions to save and load the game. So since our world is what contains all of the data that needs to be saved as a reference to the data store, we're going to add a new key down event handler in here to listen to when either the F1 or the F2 keys are pressed. So here's our event listener here. Pretty straightforward. We're just looking at the key code. So if it's F1, then we're going to save. If it's F2, then we're going to load. So all we need to do is to write these save and load methods. So let's add those right below our constructor. All right, so we're almost to the finish line here. Let's save our game state to local storage. Set item. I'm just going to call this Minecraft params, and this is going to be a stringified version of our world parameters. And then I also want to save the data store. So we'll set another item called Minecraft data, and we're going to stringify our data store's data. And that's really it. That saves all of the data that represents our procedurally generated world and all the player changes to local storage. We can do that all in 2 lines. And now we need to update the status. Say game saved. And then we don't want this to persist forever, so I'll just do a set timeout here. All right, so that should save the game. So let's go test that out. So I'm going to go whack a few blocks here and place a couple more down. Then let's hit F1. Let me bring up the console first. Hit F1. Game saved. So you see that popped up. Now let's go inspect local storage. Right, so I'm in the storage tab in Chrome here. I think I'm actually using Firefox, but same difference. Local storage. And there we go. You can see Minecraft data. So you can see all of the data stored there. So this is the position of each block and the block type it was changed to. And then we also have our world parameters here. So we have our terrain, we have our tree trunk, canopy, clouds. So this is all the information that we need. Now we just got to reload it back in and regenerate the world. And that's all we need to load the game. So our load function is be very similar to this. We'll do this dot params is equal to local storage get item Minecraft params. Then this data store data is equal to local storage get item Minecraft data. So we got to make sure that these keys match here. We're going to have a bad time. And then we'll just copy our status text to update. So I'm actually going to make this all caps. Game loaded. So this will be, okay, that's all right. So after we've loaded this data, we need to go and regenerate the world. And I can see right away that's going to cause some issues here because we're clearing the data store. So let's see, how do we want to handle that? Let's just take that out for now. I think the easiest way to handle that clearing of the data store, we'll add a parameter here called clear cache. So we'll set this to false by default. So when we're generating and loading, we're not going to clear the cache. So if clear cache is true, then this data store clear. Now when we're generating from our UI here, we're regenerating the world entirely, we do want to clear that cache. So let's go test that out now. We can close our console. So let's just do something pretty basic here. Hack away at some blocks, and then we'll put a couple stone blocks down. Maybe a leaf for good measure. All right, so hitting F1, it's going to save that. Now let's reload. Changes are completely gone. So if I do F2, see our player is falling here. Let's reset the player position. Doesn't look like our world is wanting to reload here. So let's do a bit of debugging on that. All right, so I did something pretty dumb here. I think I'm getting a little too excited that we're closing out this project. When we're getting items from local storage, they are in string format, so we need to parse that back into an object. So the console is spitting out some errors about things not existing, and eventually I traced it down to this by comparing against my old code. Let's try that one more time. Let's remove some blocks here, and then lay down a couple blocks here, and then hit F1. Okay, game saved. We'll do a reload. Blocks are gone. Now let's load that saved game. And there we go. We can see that our world has now loaded and popped into view. So that's really cool. So I can, modify this. So I want to lay down some leaf blocks. I can resave it. Reload one more time. And then hit F2. There we go. Our world has reloaded. All right, folks, that's a wrap. That is it for this tutorial series. So hit me up in the comments below what you want to see for that last 10th and final video. It's viewer choice, so whatever gets the most likes is what I'm going to work on. So if you've enjoyed this, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons. If you want to see more tutorials like this, let me know. And until next time, take care, everyone. Thanks for watching.